Hello, and welcome to the How I Tested That podcast. I'm your host, David J. Bland. I'm an author and advisor, and I'm fascinated with testing early stage ideas. I've helped companies all around the world, and in this podcast, I connect with entrepreneurs and innovators who had the courage to test their ideas with real people in the market, with sometimes surprising results. Please join us as we explore the ups and downs of experimentation together. In this episode, I'm joined by Gil Vaisman. He's the founder of GoADU, a construction company focused on building accessory dwelling units. We explore how he went from a 15-year career in film editing to building a construction business that helps homeowners unlock equity and create new living spaces. What started out as a personal project in his own backyard turned into a growing business built through trial, error, and constant iteration. Gil shares how he tested his way into the market, from helping friends navigate permitting to evolving into a guaranteed fixed pricing model. We also dig into how he qualifies customers, avoids costly mistakes, and thinks about what to test next in an industry that's rapidly changing. If you're trying to turn a personal pain point into something scalable, this episode is a great look at how testing can lead to a viable business. Enjoy my conversation with Gil Vaisman. Welcome to the podcast, Gil.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you on. It's a topic I want to learn more about, and you are one of the experts in it. And it's about construction, and we haven't had a lot of shows about construction. So before we dive into the actual testing of the nuances of everything, could you give people a little bit of background on yourself and how you got into this industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from a separate career in film. I was a TV editor for almost 15 years, went to film school, so that's my background. And I was a freelancer, and that's the one thing that sounds good on paper, but once you start having kids and mortgages, it's an uncomfortable place to be, not knowing where your next gig is going to come from. And also you're capped in your upside based on how many hours you can work with because you're exchanging time for money. And so I loved what I did. I still love it, but I had to find a business, and it found me. I searched for a lot of businesses. I almost got into property management, short-term rentals. My dad was an entrepreneur, and I had that spirit. I almost opened a hedge fund at some point. And at the end, it was right in my backyard the whole time. 2017, we built an ADU with my wife. We were at the top of the budget. We bought a house for pretty much as we could lend. And we had the ADU as a way to pay for that mortgage. And it was paying for the mortgage. And we were talking with friends that would come to our house. And it's like, what's this thing in your yard? And it's like, oh, it's an ADU. You should do one. It makes sense. You have the land. It's already paid for. And so we were helping people out with how to navigate the permitting and finding a contractor and how to do the process from our experience. And a couple of years later, I realized that I could try to market myself as this ADU guy, this ADU expert, and provide the services to clients. And that's how we got launched end of 2020, middle of the pandemic. And my plan B, which was this GoADU business, with time, it became my plan A. And now it's what I do full time. I don't have to work freelance editing anymore it's been a few years now, and I'm really happy about it.
I love that. I love that winding history. I myself also have a winding history. And I do think it's always interesting to me when I interview people, what are the similarities between industries that seem very different at the surface? So is there anything from film editing, anything from the skills you were using there in freelancing that you find, oh yeah, this actually kind of applies here too?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, both are like the production of a documentary or of a TV show, which is what I was doing, and the building of a structure are incredibly similar. One happens on media, like the product that gets shown on a screen. The other one you can sleep on and live on. but like they both require a set of plans, which is a script. They both require different departments and teamwork, which is subs and your own production team, which is your laborers, and your production manager, which is your project manager. And you're trying to meet a budget and you're trying to meet a timeline. And in both, you need to coordinate all the moving pieces. So my background in film production, I feel like anybody that has done line producing could become a construction project manager in a heartbeat.
I love that. And for those of you, we have listeners all around the world that don't understand what an ADU is. It stands for accessory dwelling unit. Could you give them like a high level of what that is before we jump into all the processes of testing around it?
Absolutely. ADU, also known as an accessory dwelling unit, and I know this by heart already, so it's easy for me to answer this one. It's also known as a granny flat, an in-law suite, or a guest house. It's an independent living structure that can be attached or detached from your main home, and it's a secondary dwelling that exists in your lot. Laws in many states and in many cities allow you to have that secondary dwelling in a single family zoned residential lot. And locally here in California, we've had this law since 2017. They've become more popular. As recently as last month, they passed laws in New York City allowing this to happen. And it's becoming more and more popular throughout the country.
So what are some of the things that people, or maybe you personally experience as issues and just confusing pains that you're dealing with when you try to build one of these? What was it that drew other people to you as beginning to be the expert in this topic?
Having been there from the beginning, as soon as the law passed, I was like, I got to get my hands into one of these. And I started, my first experience was in a tough jurisdiction. Here in SoCal, the city of LA is the easiest city. It's the most streamlined. They have the most resources. Smaller cities like Pasadena, Burbank, Culver City, Beverly Hills, Santa Monica. The small cities are a pain in the behind to work with. They don't have the resources. They Mickey Mouse you with everything. And I was in the city of Burbank, which is notoriously difficult to deal with. So I was put through the fire. My first experience going as an owner builder, hiring a draftsman, not even an architect to do this. I was put through the ringer, and the lessons that I learned were expensive and personal for me. And so every time that I would repeat this process with a friend or with a client, I started accumulating experience in what not to do. And especially with a process that was new, that was something that was unproven, their only way to know it is by repetition, trial and error, and having a growth mindset of mistakes are learning opportunities. And right now, I ask 20, 25 questions before I sign anybody. And if I don't go through that questionnaire, we're not going anywhere, because like I already know that we need this things figured out before we lay the ground.
Wow, that many questions. I'm wondering, what were some things that you tried that you thought would work early on that just went a bit sideways and didn't end up how you thought, but at least you learned and maybe it became a question?
For example, for the permitting process, I work now with about 5 different architectural firms, designers, and I work with a team that is a draftsman or a designer. It doesn't have to be an architect. You don't need a license to do it, but you need to know what you're doing. You need to have experience in that jurisdiction with that city's code, and each city has a different flavor. It's still going to be a chocolate cake, but like one might have raisins, one might not. And having that experience, and then we use expediters as well. Someone that just, their job is to navigate the bureaucracy of the city to deal with it specifically. That goes a long way. In some cities, we develop relationship with the plant checkers and the people in building and safety. They already know, like, okay, it's coming from GoADU. We know they might not know everything that they're doing, but they're trying their best. And so we give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, that sounds pretty accurate to me. Just dealing with different places where we've lived in California. I think it's interesting to me that this came out of a personal problem that you experienced. You navigated it, and then people came to you. They, hey, what's that thing in your yard? You start sharing it, and then they get interested, and you help them. At what point did you feel as if, oh, this could be a business?
It was my wife. I was doing DBAs left and right. I had a corporation, and I was filing for DBAs every month with my brightest idea and designing the website and doing all that. And she said, like, this ADU thing, like going to construction, it was 2020 was the year. That's when I actually incorporated, because like I couldn't use my corporation that I used for media as a DBA for construction. I needed a new corporation because I needed to get a license. And so I needed to pass the test. I had enough experience doing owner-builder projects, and I had enough flips under my belt to qualify for the 5 years experience that you need as a foreman. So that I had it. It was the learning how to pass the test for the contracting test here in California. Like, not everybody can just like get a contractor license, but I got my own. And it was around 2020 when I realized that like this could be a service that has enough demand, has enough growth to give it a good run. It's like, I don't believe my line of business is going to be necessarily around in 50 years. Like, we're going to have to pivot at 10, 15 years at some point in the future. But if I get 10, 15 years of a profitable business, I'm a happy camper. I'll pivot and I'll leave something else for my kids by then.
Yeah, I agree. I think 2020 was such a weird year too. And we bought our house in 2020, and it was such a surreal experience. You know, the home inspector wouldn't even let us, be there. And shocker, are still finding things wrong with our house today. It's like, oh, we'll just do it on Zoom. And it's like, oh, okay. But how much of that do you think is timing? Like, were ADUs becoming more popular because of what we were doing, going through with the pandemic? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, ADUs definitely. Before, we would advertise for guest houses or granny flats or in-law suites. We were basically educating people on what you can do with your lot, like, hey, here's an opportunity to mine your property. Unfortunately, people with equity think that they need to either sell their house or go into debt to get access to their equity. And we showed an alternative. And it was a lot of education and a lot of, you can keep your house, gain equity, gain cash flow, and gain room for your future, maybe your kids, maybe your aging parents. Like, you can rent it now, maybe rent it later. We have but it's an asset that's going to be there forever. And the equity, whatever number you take out, you're going to make it up in your property value going up. So it was such a no-brainer. But at the beginning, there was a lot of education. People weren't aware what that is. Nowadays, I would say the last 3 years, it's become so popular because everybody has a neighbor that has done it or a friend that has done it, that the word ADU rings a bell with everybody that lives in California. Like, you don't need to translate it anymore. Now I'm starting to do this like podcast and going out, and my audience is a little wider. So now I'm going back to the days where I had to like do this basic education of like, you can do this. It's not a matter of whether you can or can't. It's a matter of what haven't you done it yet. Like, financially, it makes great sense for people that like have that value, like are rich on paper, but they just don't feel that rich on a day-to-day world. They're struggling to make it to the end of the month. And all of a sudden, like, you can tap into that equity. It's an outstanding opportunity that, like, such a win-win. And then macroeconomically as well, it's a part of the solution to the housing crisis. So it's such a net positive that it was easy to be enthusiastic about ADUs because I felt like it was such a positive change for everybody that like it's truly a victimless crime.
Yeah. Also culturally, it's really interesting here in the States, having traveled abroad a lot, that it's almost like we have our core nuclear family and then we don't necessarily have extended family living with us. It's not culturally the norm. Whereas other parts of the world, of course you would have your extended family nearby or with you. And it's really interesting to see people like, oh, I do actually want my parents as they get older to be nearer to me or things like that. And I feel like maybe culturally that's shifting also a bit in the country where it's like, no, they don't have to live, in a retirement home really far away. Like they could live with us nearby. And so I'm wondering, are you seeing some of that, shift as well?
Absolutely. Originally, we would see mostly immigrant clients building ADUs for family members. So it used to be people from Asian countries, Latin American countries, where you traditionally keep your family at bay. That used to be the core of the non-rental unit clients. But now more and more, we're starting to see the American people like doing it especially for their sons. We're starting to see more the older parent, like with adult children that they cannot afford a starting home. And they're like, you know what? Like, I want you to be independent, but I'm not ready to kick you out yet. So what if I move to the ADU and you stay in the main house? And we're seeing that a lot. Like, of course, people want to get the brand new ADU, like it's the price, and then see who stays where. But like people just doing that switch, that inheritance, they're doing it in real life. And like, again, it's a great point you brought up, but it's another net positive that I feel, which is keeping extended families together for longer. Like grandparents get to experience what it's like for their grandkids, which is, I feel, a beautiful tradition I grew up with my grandmother at the neighborhood. She would cross the street and be there for us. And then she would come to every vacation and grandma was part of the family. That's how I grew up. It wasn't an ADU situation. We were literally neighbors, but I grew up in Colombia and Colombian Jewish. And the grandma was like, you moved where your family was at. That's how my family ended up in Colombia from Europe in the first place. It was like, we know a cousin, come move with us. We know someone, come move with us. So I find that to be so enriching, to having your family nearby.
Yeah, similar. I grew up in, different area of the world, but I grew up in rural Appalachia. And it was like our house. And then we had a little garden, actually quite a sizable garden. Next to us was my aunt and uncle. Next to them, my grandmother, grandfather. Next to them was my great aunt. And then we had our little church there. Like it was, I look back and I was like, you know what? That's not common anymore, that you have family surrounding you that way. And of course, now, I'm living in California and it's a different situation. But I think back to those memories of, I'll just walk to my grandparents' house, and have breakfast with them and everything. And I just think it's interesting, the space you're in. You started around 2017 when the laws were changing, allowing this in California. 2020, the pandemic hits. People are looking for different accommodations. We also have immigrants coming in and bringing their extended family sort of worldview of like, we want them near us. And then, your American neighbors look at that and say, oh, that looks like something that maybe we should do that, And I feel like there's a lot of things working in your favor here, maybe not zoning laws aside and the mess that is. I was curious when you were talking about this, you mentioned before we got on the podcast about pricing and testing pricing and how these things are sold. Tell me a little bit about how you're approaching that, how you're trying to test different models and what you're learning so far from that.
Okay, so it's been an evolution because originally when you're starting, you have to have a competitive edge. Like I have 5 bids from 5 different contractors. Who should I hire? And most people go with that person that is most experienced. And when you're starting and you don't have that track record to begin with, your competitive advantage is I was the cheapest. That's how we got started. We barely made money in the first ADUs we built. We had to compete on price. We had to fight our way to those people that were budget conscientious, which are now, knowing what I know and having been through what I've been through, some of the people with the lowest budgets tend to be the pickiest. I had to put up with a lot of that, and projects where I was just like, I'm hoping I'm not going to lose money on this one. But like, I marketed the living crap out of every opportunity that I had. I took pictures of everything, made sure that the finishes were Instagram worthy, and started leveraging that very quickly to go to the position where we can position our brand to what we are right now, which is top 20% of the market. If you are looking for the cheapest, we're not your fit anymore, because we offer a product that like offers some guarantees, white glove service, and that involves that we need to price ourselves out of that person that is looking for budget, and budget is the most important thing for them. We're not a fit anymore, and we've evolved out of it, which is a different value proposition. You know, there's a famous triangle, which is I want it fast, I want it cheap, and I want it good. And everybody knows this. It's across every industry. You got to pick 2 out of the 3. Like, it just, the perfect equation of getting all 3 of those, it's just not possible. So we're not the cheapest, and we know we can be good, and we know we can be fast, but that involves losing a lot of potential customers because they are more budget conscientious, and it's a compromise that we're comfortable with now.
Yeah, I see that as you learn, your segments do change, and you don't always stick with those early customers as you evolve the business. You mentioned something before we got on the podcast, which was this idea of a guaranteed fixed price. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how you tested that and what you learned from that?
I read it in a book about marketing, and the example that they give is the example of CarMax, how CarMax wanted to revolutionize the car selling industry by providing all the scary stuff that used car salesmen brought to the equation. So when I got into the construction industry, I saw a lot of scary stuff. And you would talk to people, and the fear is change orders, contractors changing the price mid-build. It's like, oh, but wait, there's a surprise here. Now you need to pay for that as a client. And whatever we discussed is not. And I found that like it was kind of culturally accepted. People were like, a lot of clients, I would try to educate them like, hey, I'm not going to be the lowest, but like everything's included here. This super low price you're hearing is going to come with surprises. And most clients just run through that red flag, and they were like, no, I want that super low price. They promised me that. And they're on for a terrible experience in terms of just, it's not pleasant. It's not a pleasant way to do business. So I try to tackle that head first by being extremely thorough, making the assumption that things will go wrong, price that in, and offer that peace of mind. And like the last Google review we got, like I love it. I show it to clients because they mentioned that like we stuck to the price to the cent. The number we gave them was the number they paid. No surprises, guaranteed pricing. If you don't change your mind, we're not going to change our price.
Wow. So that almost feels as if in a world where people are trying to compete with the same, like that might be one of your unique value propositions, you know, that we have this guaranteed fixed price. We know what we're doing, and there aren't going to be any surprises. I think I like how you modeled it to like CarMax, but for ADUs in a way. So how was your conversion rate on those? Like, how did people respond to, because that's a very different experience. Like going into CarMax first time, I've sold cars to CarMax, but I've not purchased one there. But I remember it was a very different experience walking into a CarMax lot versus other lots. So what's it like? Like, what were the conversion rates when you were interacting with them, pitching this for the first time?
So in construction, conversion rates are typically anywhere from 10 to 20%. Like if you're above 15, you're knocking out of the park. We're right about the 17% of, so out of every 7 people that come to knocking on our door, we're going to end up with 1 client, which I think it's pretty good because just by how we position ourselves as a brand, our customers are only 20% of the entire people that are going to build an ADU. So out of 10 people that are going to build an ADU, you have your owner builders. They're not even going to hire a contractor. they're going to hire subs directly. That's a percentage. Then you have people that are like, want to save as much as they can. They'll take a non-licensed contractor. They'll take a handyman. They'll take whatever they can to save some money. That's another percentage. And so the people that are our people, which is people that like have had typically experience with another contractor and know all the tips and tricks and are ready to like not do that again and are vetting the exhaustive, like really vetting every contractor, that it tends to be 1 out of 5. 1 out of 5 are not going to go for the lowest bid because they know already. So like if we're so my best case scenario, like statistically speaking, is if I'm converting 20%, that's like batting 300. That's 90% from the free throw line. That's amazing. So I think we're doing pretty well now.
Yeah, it sounds like, I like how you broke it down in different subsegments out of the overall segment. If you can share, what gets you excited? Or is there something you want to test that you haven't tried yet in this industry? Granted, you've been in it for a while now and it's still an evolving industry. Is there something you want to test, like something maybe different that other ADUs don't do?
I've always been fascinated by prefabricated and they're called SIPs. So one day I want to get into that. Like it's this new technology that allows you to prefab. The problem has been that either it's a higher price for a good quality, but like you don't end up saving money over stick build, or it's horrible quality for a cheaper price. Like we still haven't found that person that like can get us a good price for the top quality. But the moment we find it, like I'm jumping ship. I'm trying to sell prefab as much as I can because I believe that there are inefficiencies in the way we're building today. Bringing the materials to the site to then work on site, like conceptually prefabricated makes sense. Practically, we haven't gotten there yet. And it's been a process of decades until like someone will crack that code and I want to jump into it when that happens. And the other process, it's called SIPs. I forgot what it stands for, but like it's this models where you basically pour the wall and the insulation all at once, and you basically skip framing. It allows you to accelerate the building process by like 30, 40%, and cost-wise, but it's hard to find people that know what they're doing with this process because it's so new. But the moment that like we'll jump ship and do things that way instead of how we're doing it right now.
Oh, I like that you have some things you're excited about. I'm wondering, like from a theme perspective, what we normally do is we kind of frame this as desirability risk, which is like risk around the customer and the market and the jobs to be done and all that. The viability risk is usually around cost and revenue, willingness to pay, all that. And then feasibility is just like, can you do it? Is it like technically feasibly possible? Is it going to violate any regulations or anything? It almost sounds as if the risk on some of these is more like backstage risk of, well, it's either there's not a lot of people that know how to do this or do it well, or maybe a little bit of viability risk where it's just really expensive to do. It feels the desirability isn't necessarily the riskiest thing there.
No, not at all. Who wouldn't want to be able to save money and save time? It's a no-brainer. If you're not compromising the quality, if the structure is going to be well built. We're having these technologies for commercial projects mostly, where bigger, more experienced builders are jumping ship already. But I'm looking forward to, because I have made a few phone calls to people that know how to do it. And they're like, you need all the certifications, you need to know how to do this. And then there's the fear of like, I don't want to be the guinea pig to maybe it's not as viable,
Yeah, I would say in the art of kind of like starting small, like what's a small test you could do, but not risk your brand in doing so? Because your brand is everything and you don't necessarily want to word of mouth, especially in construction, I imagine can get around. So, but I'm glad you're excited about that. That's cool. That's cool to hear. So we've covered so much in this conversation so far with starting in film, which I knew a little bit, but I didn't know the extent of you working in film, how that transferred over, finding kind of this niche with ADUs and how you've learned and grown that business over time. If folks are listening to this and they want to learn more about what you do and they want to learn how to get in contact with you, what's the best way to reach out?
Easy. I have 2 companies. One is GoADU. Website is goadu.com. parent company is Vaisman Construction. We also build single family homes under that umbrella because it doesn't have GoADU in the name. And I'm available also, like Gil Vaisman, hit me up, like send me a DM, whatever, we'll answer. I'm not that popular yet. So hopefully one day I'll have a team of people answering, but right now I'll answer.
You're not popular yet. Maybe after this episode, you'll be much more popular. I want to thank so much for hanging out with us, talking about some of your evolution in this and how you kind of tested your different pricing models and what you're going to test in the future and what you're excited about. I really appreciate you hanging out with us today, Gil.
No, it was a pleasure, man. It was really a fun conversation.
Thank you for listening to another episode of How I Tested That, where we share stories about experimentation, tips, and tricks. If you learned something new, please recommend us to a friend or colleague. And remember, keep testing your ideas.